Have you ever wondered, what do these people know that I don't know? How do I do it? How do I find my purpose, my passions? What if you could sit down with some of the wisest experts, everyday leaders, and inspirational people who could answer your deepest questions? That is what we do here on the Inspirational Living Podcast. We invite you to join us as we hold conversations, share wisdom, tips, and tools to inspire you, ignite your passions and vision for your life, to awaken your sense of purpose and hope, and leave you inspired to design your best life. Join me, your host, psychologist Dr. Shawn Horn, as we take you on an inspirational, motivational, and educational journey so you can inspire by living an inspired life. This episode is brought to you by Toi Magazine. You can find the link to Toi on my website or on any of my social media, or you can go to www.toi.com. On this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with my dear friend, Janine McJannet. I had the opportunity to do a live with her on Facebook a year ago, and at that time, she introduced to me the concept of a laundry list, and ever since then, I have wanted to bring her on this podcast to share with you, the audience, what is a laundry list and what is an adult child. Let me tell you a little bit about Janine. She not only describes herself as an adult child, but also an unapologetic woman, a well-being empowerment coach, speaker, writer, and founder of her private Facebook group, Soul Sister Lounge. Janine also hosts the Sold Out series, a live talk show where she shares vulnerable stories of struggles and strengths with other children so others can find hope and to know it is possible to break the cycle of dysfunction in our own lives. She believes that hope is the first step to healing. Janine now works with women who also grew up in dysfunctional family systems and gives them the tools that they can use to break the cycle that holds them hostage to other people's perceived needs. Her core mission is to connect, inspire, and empower other women to change their lives too by unleashing their old stories and creating the new. She has found her voice. Now let's get started with the episode and you can hear Janine for yourself. Hi, Janine. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Hi, Shawn, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so super excited to talk to you.
Well, you and I had an opportunity to do a live together on Facebook about a year ago. And at that time, you introduced to me this concept of adult children and the laundry list. I had never heard about that before. And after our talk, I looked into it a little bit further, and the information absolutely blew me away. And as I've shared with you in our earlier conversation, it really made an impact on my life as well as my work with clients and my friends and family as I've shared this. So I've been very eager to have you on as our first guest on the Inspired Living Podcast. So let's go ahead and get started and tell me about what is this adult child of alcoholic concept. What is that?
The adult child of alcoholics or dysfunctional family systems. So back in 1971, I believe it was, Tony A. is a man, an anonymous last name, who discovered that children of alcoholics have different issues and different concerns that need to be dealt with. So there was the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and there was Al-Anon, but this didn't really fit into those children being 18 years and older, because this was all about the addiction being their problem. So these children didn't necessarily have an addiction, and their parents didn't necessarily have an alcohol addiction. So when we talk about dysfunctional family systems, it could be alcohol, it could be any drug, it could be any kind of behavior. Mm-hmm. It could be behavior like obsessive compulsive or over-religious, any behavior that creates an upbringing and the patterns that may not be deemed as normal. Those patterns that we learn, the behaviors that we learn from our parents, they carry on with us through our adulthood and shows up in our own behavior towards our own immediate family, our partners, our friends, our work, and our children. when I came upon the adult child of alcoholics, I was just looking for a title for a talk that I was giving, not categorizing myself as anybody. It's just like, oh, poor me. I had a bit of a bummer of an upbringing. I found some things out that really, I thought I'd hidden for so long. I thought it's time to bring them up. So I was Googling it, and up came the laundry list. I remember it so clearly because I just started, the laundry list, and I started reading it. By the end of it, I was gobsmacked, and I was just like, I felt I am not a bad person because I could associate with so many of these at different levels, so many of these traits. That's where it came from. And the Adult Children of Alcoholics is a different setup to those other two. It's a 12-step program that's offered in a fellowship, but not all adult children take that 12 steps because we all come in at different places in our healing path. Mm-hmm. So I've spent a lot of time healing myself.
It really reminded me of the shame-bound family rules. Many people are taught when they come from shame-bound systems, which is don't speak up, don't reveal secrets, be loyal to the family, be overly loyal where maybe loyalty isn't deserved, tolerating intolerable things for a long time. These are the unwritten rules that when someone comes from a family of alcoholism or dysfunction, they are programmed with some of these mindsets that then they carry into adulthood, repeating those patterns of not giving themselves freedom to speak up or freedom to have their own perspective. Is that what you're referring to with the patterns that are carried over from the families?
Absolutely. And it goes beyond ourselves and our generation before us. It can go up to 2 or 3 generations before. These are inside the cellular level of our beings. So when we have children, it could skip a generation and these patterns could show up again. So it just showed to me the importance of really following your curiosity and understanding what your patterns are. Like that's one of the first steps, is just to say, is this a pattern? And is this a pattern that I like, or where does this pattern come from? Mm-hmm. And doing, the work and doing the understanding, the reading, the writing, the talking, the connecting, all of those pieces to try and understand it. So that's how it happened upon me. The laundry list with the items there, I went through each of them, and the big red book, which is like the Bible that associates with the Adult Children of Alcoholics Fellowship, has got gobs of information. It's like a resource book that I keep. I've got tabs on it all over the place because when I feel triggered in any aspect of my current life, when I feel that, that little bubble inside of your tummy or something, it makes me curious, where is that coming from? And why am I feeling angst or anxious? Or why do I feel like I want to run away or isolate? Why do I want to feel like I want to people please all the time? Why do I want to feel like I just want to stuff it down? Mm-hmm. Why do I get frightened when, people raise their voice? All of these. So every little individual trait can be triggered by something different. That's what makes it such a unique and interesting path.
So I'm hearing you describe people's approach to life, approach to relationships and circumstances, but also their defenses. When they are triggered, what are the defenses that are activated to maybe people please or isolate or withdraw? Can you tell us a little bit about how you would describe a trigger when someone's triggered?
I'm probably triggered daily because it comes up, but I've learned very well to catch that trigger. It's like going out fishing and in life. And if something gets on your hook, you want to make sure that it's good for you. Right now, if you see under the water, if you see it's like a big fish that you don't like, I don't know how else to talk about that. You can decide not to keep it, or you can keep it. So when you feel triggered, for me, it comes to me in my tummy. And it could be anybody raising their voice, not screaming, but just raising their voice with sternness. And that makes me just sort of shrink back a little bit because of how I grew up. There was a lot of yelling. I grew up yelling and screaming. Nobody was heard ever, but people always raised their voices. So that's come with me through my life. And I thought, well, if I need to be heard, I need to raise my voice. So in my awareness of it all and shutting and pulling that back, when other people raise their voice, my trigger is to raise mine as well. And then you have this competitive notch going up and up and up. And that leads to nowhere. That only leads to a mess or chaos, which is also something that adult children love to thrive in, is chaos, because that's how they grew up. That's how they feel safe. That's how they feel comfortable.
So
So
did they
that's,
become somewhat addicted to conflict or drawn to conflict?
yeah. This is what makes it super interesting in my learnings, is that you can feel safe, you can feel alone and afraid when it's calm.
How would you explain that? Why that would be uncomfortable?
It could be uncomfortable for children who've grown up in a family where there was no calm. So
Mhm.
they didn't understand what calm, their safety, what they knew love was supposed to be like, was chaos all the time. When it comes to calm, and I remember when I first met my husband decades ago and sat down to dinner with his family at the table, and everyone was kind of talking nicely, gently, and listening to each other. And I can remember going, wow, this is so weird. Because my family sitting at a table was not like that. There was bickering and there was arguments and there was booze at the table, and it was just chaos. So me coming into a calm situation, I just went, this feels uncomfortable. I feel a little anxious about being here because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel safe because my safety net looked completely different. So a lot of learning has gone on since then. Just because we grew up in a situation, and just because we grew up with these events always happening and with these people in our lives, and with abuse of alcohol strongly in our family, or whatever addiction or dysfunction you have, it doesn't mean that it has to stay like that. It's a learning process, and we just have to find that curiosity within ourselves to dig it out, to excavate it and release it, because I find that a lot of healing starts with that.
I'm hearing you say that people get comfortable with what they know, and when it's unfamiliar, that becomes very uncomfortable. And so in some ways, people will tolerate intolerable things because that's a comfortable place for them, and they have a place of complacency. How did you give yourself permission or challenge yourself to have the courage to step out of that comfort that was in the dysfunction to transform yourself?
Step by step, little step by little step. And I like how you say that, because I didn't find the courage before it happened. I had to make some commitments. And when we make a commitment, the courage will naturally fall. So there's facing your fears and walking through them. So it's acknowledging what your fears are. That was one of my first steps. Someone said to me, I had the most amazing exercise, was write down all of the fears that you have. And I was like, I'm not really afraid of anything. And she said, don't take your pen off the paper. So I sat there and I wrote, okay, I'm afraid of screaming adults. And then I just kept running and writing and writing. And I had a whole page, and I stopped, and there were tears because I realized that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I was afraid of this. And so then I looked at this list, and I kind of put pieces together, and I segmented them together. And I found that most of them came under this fear of abandonment. That just made, like, fear of isolation, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, not being smart enough, beautiful enough. What does that mean? For me, in the work in my family, I was afraid of being abandoned. And then I looked back through my whole lifeline and went, this is why I did that. I was afraid of somebody leaving me because my parents had split up when I was young. It was really a big aha moment. So that was like the big step that I took, was just to try and understand what my fears were, the role they played.
What I love about what you're saying is that you made a choice to guide your feelings rather than follow your feelings. I think that's really one of those higher life hacks, that you don't wait till you feel it. You make the wise decision with your wise mind and then guide yourself through it, even though you're scared, even though it's just rattling your world and you want to stop and back up, but you know that this is wise and best for you. So when you made that choice, you were able to push yourself through that transformation.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, to guide. I love that, Shawn.
Now, in your story, now you're impacting so many people. You're out there public speaking, you're coaching people one-on-one, you're promoting this message of wellness, promoting the idea of sharing your story. So when someone looks at you, they may have a certain perception and not know the story, your story of what you went through. Can you share with us your story?
I can share my story in a little bit of rhythm, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
I've recently really started loving to write. And so I wrote this little song, and it's not long, so if you bear with me, this will give you a bit of an idea of my story. I was almost born in a taxi cab. The night before Halloween, my mother held me in her arms, my little darling Janine. She said, "You'll be my pillar of strength for the next decade or two. But please excuse your dad and me for what we're gonna do. We're going to drink and smoke and fight and scream and call each other names. Codependent behavior was one of our favorite games. We tried our best but had no clue of what would become of you. So forgive us now, my little girl, and please forgive you too." She said those things that burned into your mind. That wasn't really me. The fire you saw, the flames that grew, I blame the family tree. You suffered much, well, we all did. Wish I'd been there through your fear. If I could hug and kiss you now, I'm so sorry, my dear. And I wish they didn't drink and smoke and fight and scream and call each other names. Alcohol and its foul deeds was one of their favorite games. I tried my best but had no clue of what would become of me. I've forgiven myself and them as well. I'm replanting my family tree.
Oh, I love that. So beautiful. Thank you.
That's a little bit of it. And I mean, that's been in my heart for years, and I've just got it out. So growing up with that and watching some really terrible things as a youth. I mean, everybody, I think, in this world has some sort of trauma. Everybody's got stories. And my story was my parents. They clashed. It was toxic. At the age of 10, my mother tried to drunkenly kill herself, naked in her fur coat outside in the snow, knife in hand. So these images that stay with me. And I lost my childhood and I lost my voice as I began to mother my own mother. And then at 24, one of the biggest turning points in my life, when I came to visit my father, who I hadn't seen for 10 years. I came to see him because I loved him. I loved my parents, regardless of their addiction and their toxic behavior towards each other. The very day before I was going to leave from visiting him, I went into his house, and there he was lying on his bed. Everything was quiet, and there wasn't a sound. There wasn't even a breath. And I had found my father dead. I like to think of it as the scariest moment in my life, but also the most powerful moment. It didn't make me shift into, the goddess who was going to fly away and learn a lesson. It did the opposite for me, and I went in this spiral of shame and blame and guilt and pain, and I felt so sorry for him. I felt so sorry for me. I felt so sorry for everything. So that's my old story. It's a very much a part of who I am today, but it's also allowed me to, by releasing it, to create room to write my new story. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I can see how when people go through things like that, they say to themselves, if only I had done this, or if I hadn't done that, or they start looking for ways that they could have impacted that situation. And I find that that's our effort to try to control something that was uncontrollable to survive. If I can survive with some idea that I had the ability to influence it, then I won't be blindsided again. It's actually a defense mechanism that some people will use to manage these moments where life just blindsides us with a really traumatic situation.
Power of one moment, and also the power of forgiveness. And you have to give yourself permission to feel the feels. You can't bury them down. I guess if I could say a regret, although I am where I am because of everything that's happened to me, is to not to bury those feelings down and don't feel guilty. It'll happen. The guilt will come. I mean, I felt guilty. I could have given him first aid right there on the spot. It may have revived him. But instead, I ran outside and screamed for help. That's what I knew how to do. So I did feel guilty, but I shoved that guilt down forever and ever. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, this was his time. This was his time. And it's not my fault. It wasn't my business. That was his choice.
How would an ACA philosophy tie into that? What do they teach people who are in situations like that are taking responsibility for other people's choices, other people's feelings? What do we learn through ACA?
Well, so much. What we haven't really talked about is the laundry list, right? Some of the characteristics in that laundry list are that we become isolated and afraid of people. We become approval seekers and lose our identity, which is like the people-pleasing thing. We are frightened by angry people and personal criticism. We have a viewpoint of victims, which is, a lot of these I sort of carried around with me. We have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility that enables us to not so much look at ourselves, but think of blaming other people for all of our own faults. And we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. We become addicted to excitement. We confuse love and pity and tend to love people that we can pity and rescue, the fixers. And we stuff those feelings down. There's so much, right? We have the low sense of self-esteem and terrified of abandonment. In terms of my story and how AC can help, I look at all of those because there is a laundry list of these quote-unquote problems, but there's also what they call the flip side of the laundry list. And that flip side is the solution. So we can always come to anybody with a problem, but what it teaches you is that there's a solution to it. And that solution is inside you primarily. And it just means that you have to start to connect with people, share your stories, learn from each other, because everyone's at a different stage of healing. And really, in order to help somebody who's not quite at your stage of healing, you only need to be that one step ahead to give them the inspiration, the empowerment, and the motivation, and vice versa. If you're looking for someone, then see somebody who's been where you're going, who's been where you've been, and ask them and share stories. And then you realize that you're not alone on this journey. It's about that. And this big red book has got gobs of information about how you can connect to other people. There's online groups and there's meetings and there's sponsors. It's a 12-step program, but there's also just knowing in your heart and in your soul that if you can trust one person to share your story with and share their stories with and start the healing process, that's a great place to be.
I find so often clients think their stories need to be very severe, or they'll say things that like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as people going through fill in the blank.
Yeah.
But then when they start sharing, they do have a story that needs to be attended to. And it is worthy to be addressed, and it is worthy to be shared, no matter how one evaluates it. If it seems to be a mild challenge or a severe challenge, if it's distressing us, we need to reach out and get support and help, and not compare our stories to other people's stories or our suffering to other people's suffering. When you had mentioned about abandonment, the fear of abandonment, one of the things that has been so striking to me is that in people's efforts to avoid abandonment, they end up abandoning themselves. They have self-betrayal. They betray their boundaries. They betray their needs. They betray their rights in effort to have someone not abandon them. So it makes sense to me that they would have this chronic fear of abandonment because they are chronically abandoning themselves. So they're experiencing this abandonment all day long. And so, of course, we're going to be really fearful of that.
Yeah, I like that, what you said, the boundaries, the needs, and the rights, and that's what we do. We put ourselves second on the list, and we put everyone else in front of us to the point where, there's healthy feelings you can have around that, but the unhealthy ones of people-pleasing, it's unhealthy when your own health starts to become unhealthy.
We can't go the distance maintaining that posture where we keep making self-sacrifices for other people and tolerating intolerable things or over-functioning for other people's dysfunction. Eventually, we will burn out. So we have to have that balance as we go along. And I think the tools of ACA and the laundry list are mindset tools to really help people get through these seasons of life, to understand the solution isn't outside of them, the solution is within them. So how do I change this circumstance or this person? It's having the person look within and say, how do I change myself so that I make different choices? How is it that I'm tolerating these intolerable things? How is it that I'm making other people's problems my problems? Why do I get so distressed when other people are distressed? It teaches you a different way, a different tool to get through it. So I heard you talk about this concept of following your feelings, making the choice. Essentially, when we do that, somehow we give ourselves permission. How did you give yourself permission to pursue your passions, to pursue your dreams?
Oh, that's a good one because it took a long time, little wee bits. The bottom line is that we have to listen to those little whispers, our intuition, and we don't just have to listen to them. We have to trust them, and we have to take the step. We have to jump, because if we don't jump, we're never going to go to the other side, and whatever the other side may be with you. It's really saying, am I happy with my life right now? Like, if I died tomorrow, would I have any regrets? Would I be on the hospital bed going, I wish I would have danced my dance or sung my song? And I wasn't happy with everything. I wasn't happy in the corporate job that I was in with air quality. I wasn't happy with my family because I was always stressed out and, staying up late, doing chores while everyone else was all relaxing. So I had to look at that. I had to give myself permission to be me, to be free, and to set myself and follow the things that I need to do, because we all know that we can't help other people unless we help ourselves first. And I used to think that was selfish, but it's not to me now. Sure, I can do selfish things, but self-care is the top of the list. And that's where we have to give ourselves permission to do every single day, is to do something we love, to do something that keeps us in flow, because that feeds our soul, it feeds our spirit, and then it comes back. It bounces back right on us, and then that's it. So in terms of following my passion, I had to make the commitment to quit my job. My 28-year-old government job scared the crap out of me. It did, Shawn. I was like, oh my God, all these benefits I'm going to lose. I won't have this money, blah, 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 all this security. I said, what's going to happen? I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be left out on the street. All my standards, I just pushed them down and say, you got this. I remembered December 31st last year writing the resignation, the resignation notice, and I just couldn't hit the send button. So I called my daughter Jessie, 10 years over. I said, come here and help me. And so we put our hands together and we pushed the send, and off it went. And I just went, whoa! And she's looking at me going, what's going on, Mom? I said, we're going to have a good life. We're going to do this. So it created the space to be with my children, which was a priority, and to work on myself, and to work on this coaching business, and speaking and sharing my message and helping other people heal from things that, took me a long time to start to heal from.
Yes. And so when you have those moments, I'm sure as you jump and make these really courageous big steps outside of your comfort zone, one of my favorite quotes is success comes from stepping out of your comfort zone. And so when we do that, we have these moments of tremendous doubt and fear and go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is magical thinking. I'm not being wise, and start to have those kind of doubting thoughts. How do you encourage yourself in those moments?
To act quickly. Because the more time you think about things, the more that doubt is going to settle in, and the more your inner critic mind is going to start to say, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. So it's about understanding what you want and always trying to align those steps with where you're going. You always have a choice, right? You have a choice to wake up happy, or you have a choice to wake up sad. It's up to you. So taking that jump.
And what showed up for you since you've made that choice? What opportunities have come your way?
I've started to share my voice, and I've started to create an online, beautiful, safe space called the Soul Sister Lounge, where women are coming together from all over the world who just want that connection, that inspiration, that empowerment. They want to be able to be with like-minded and like-hearted people. I have found myself as a leader, and I'm speaking on stage down in LA next weekend, and then in Calgary the following weekend with a bunch of incredible people. Les Brown is going to be down in LA, and Marlo Ellis is putting it on in Calgary. It's really about who we are. It's not necessarily what we're doing, and that's so key in my message, is that it's not about what you're doing. You could be, the CEO of a huge company. If you're not sure of who you are or what your role is, One of my favorite quotes, Shawn, is that there's two really important days in our lives, and one is being born, and the other is figuring out why.
I love that.
So when I figured out why, I just went, I'm going there, because I don't know if I'm going to be alive tomorrow. I don't know if my kids are going to wake up and find me dead on the bed. You just never know. So you have to, every single day, give a little bit, move, just keep moving forward.
Did you feel that why showed up immediately, or that it came through the process? Like that you grow as you go? Do you feel that it slowly unveiled itself, or it was sudden?
It wasn't sudden. No, this was a process for me, absolutely. And I love that, grow as you go, because I've shifted. I thought when I came into the coaching world that I can help everybody do everything. No, you can't. No, you can't at all. So get clear on what you can help people do and deliver it and be it. Walk the walk, talk the talk, understand it. And people will come to you when they see you, when they get to know you, when they trust you. So we have to do that for ourselves. We have to know who we are. We have to be able to trust our own messages. It took a long time, and sometimes it still does shift as I get clarity. That's what gives us the wisdom, is just getting clear on what we're doing.
Yes, and I find that so much is revealed as we get into motion, as we get into action. Then we discover and see things that we couldn't have seen by just sitting and waiting. And this is another one of those life hacks, so to speak, that we can understand, not to wait, but get moving. If you feel that you have this passion, you have this desire and this gift, to get moving towards, how can I serve the world with this gift? How can I make an impact and a positive difference in someone else's life by sharing my journey to make their journey easier? And it sounds like you just challenged yourself with it and stepped into it and discovered an aspect of yourself that you didn't even know would be possible at this time in your life.
Yeah. So it's trusting yourself, knowing what your strengths are, knowing what your values are, knowing what your gifts are. Because many of us hide our gifts. I've recently found out that my gift is what comes out of my mouth sometimes, and my words, and my passion to listen to other people and to help them along. To do it in a way that is not necessarily the leader or the follower, but I'm just the girl next door, and I've got a story, and this has happened to me, and this is how I'm working through it. And maybe by me talking with you, it'll help you through your next step. And so a lot of people that I've worked with are very grateful for me, for what I'm doing. And that in itself just feeds my soul.
Yeah, often I hear people say, but how do you find your gifts? How do I know what my gifts are? How did your gifts become discovered to you? How did you discover them?
It's through work too. I mean, when you ask yourself what your gifts are, what are your gifts and what are your talents and what are your strengths? Write them down. Write them down. Ask people, what do you think I'm good at? I did that. And oh my gosh, people came back to me and I just cried, because sometimes we can't see ourselves unless we see from the outside, and having that support system around us to encourage you to be your best version of yourself. So I've recently started loving to write poetry. I'm like, this is something that I've kept inside of me for years and years, and I'm loving it. So it's a gift, but it's not just a gift in terms of writing poetry. This is how I'm getting my message out from my old story and my new story combined as one, to help other people associate with it so it gives them hope. And that's my most amazing gift that I love to give anybody in my life, is hope.
Hope is so important and so powerful, to know that it's available for us at any moment, any time. It may be different than what people picture it as. They might have an expectation for how hope should look, but hope can be many different ways that it can show up. I heard a story just yesterday about a little boy who had his legs in braces, and he said to his dad, "Dad, I really feel that if you take me to this church in England, I will be healed. God will heal me." And so his father got the tickets, took him to this church, and the little boy stood at the entrance. He said, "Son, do you want me to walk down with you?" And he says, "No, Dad, I want to do it myself." You could hear him take a step, and it was click, step, click, step, click. And this little boy walked all the way to the end. He kneeled down, he prayed, And then he got up and he walked back, step, click, and the father's heart was just broken. I think they really thought a miracle would happen. And the little boy came and he said, "Son, I'm so sorry that God did not heal you." And he says, "Dad, he did heal me. He took the braces off my mind. He took the braces off my mind." This is such a powerful story that he wanted healing. Of course, we would imagine that that meant the braces go off his legs. However, the healing showed up in a different way, but it was still a healing. And that's sometimes how our own personal transformation or dreams come to realize is we set the intention, but I think where we get in our own way is the expectation for how the destination will look versus setting the expectation or setting the intention and then letting it unfold in this magical way, this miraculous way that we discover ourselves, we discover our relationship with the divine as we flow through that transformation.
That's all about letting go of the mindset that keeps us trapped in this cage that we think we live in.
And trying to control. I think that's something that ACA and the 12 steps really drive home, that point of letting go of the control, trying to control those things that we can't control and managing our part to the best of our ability. As you've shared the story, what I've heard you say is that we all have these journeys that involve pain and difficulties and shameful family backgrounds at times where we get programmed to perceive the world a certain way, to perceive ourselves, and that affects our approach to the world, but it also shapes our defenses to the world when we get triggered by things. And then we'll go into the same defensive patterns that we used as children. The mindset of how we deal with the storms and those defenses keep us paralyzed. They keep us tolerating intolerable things. And then we can't really grow and become all that we can be. And so in your story, you're saying, I didn't follow my feelings. I made a choice and I guided them. And it might have scared me. It might have been uncomfortable. But in doing so, I gave myself permission for life to be different and to encourage myself through that process, to no longer abandon myself out of fear of abandonment, but to honor myself, honor my nudges, and trust myself. Doing so, life has really transformed and shaped in a way that one would not expect. And so with that, I want to end with your higher life hack that you live by, and you shared with me earlier, that is your philosophy. So what is that higher life hack?
It's never too late to choose to change, to reconnect and rearrange. It's never too late. You can think that this is your life and this is always going to be your life, but you can choose to change. You can choose to have a different outcome. You can choose to be happy instead of sad. And of course, grief happens, and it's all about feeling the feels and accepting them, being curious as to why you have them and not letting them take over you. You only have control of one thing in your life, and that's your choices.
I love that. Never too late to choose to change, to reconnect, and rearrange. In this podcast today, we've really pointed out it's hard to do that and almost near impossible to do that by ourselves. We need resources and tools, whether it's a therapist, a coach, or attending ACA meetings. And ACA meetings are available. They're free. They are in person or on the internet. You can attend these meetings anywhere, and they're just a great resource.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Shawn. And I'm so blessed to have connected with you. We meet people for reasons sometimes. And when you and I first met before Bliss, there was an instant pull towards you. And I'm so glad that we nourished that. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. We're soul sisters. Soul Sister Lounge is where we hang out. And I am also in that group. Come join us over there. And thank you again. Thank you for joining us today. I hope this discussion was inspiring and uplifting to your journey. Please remember this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not meant to substitute a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. Also, make sure you rate this show, share with those you know, and send us a shout out. Please message me with any topics you would like me to address or questions you have on social media at Dr. Shawn Horn or on my website. Thank you again, and may you find joy in the journey and be richly blessed.